This is Wendy Halley, and you're listening to Lucid Cafe. Welcome back. In the final episode of 2020, I speak with Dr. Christina Andrle of the Vital Life Center here in Montpelier, Vermont, where she offers a magical combination of chiropractic care and acupuncture. We originally recorded this episode about a year ago. It was last December, in fact, not long after meeting each other for the first time. Since recording this episode, I've had the good fortune to experience Christina's work firsthand, no pun intended. And I'm really impressed. Sessions with her were a game changer after I experienced this crazy and turns out rare parasitic infection in my eye earlier this year. When I left the first session with her, the functioning of my eye was much closer to normal. It was like I felt like a new man. I'm super thankful to her. So Christina's approach is pretty comprehensive, which makes her not only a good practitioner to see if you have general concerns, but I've sent some folks her way with complex health issues who've benefited greatly. She also has a subspecialty doing neurointegrative work, focusing on concussions, TBIs, and neurodevelopmental disorders like autism. In our conversation, we talk about her work, and then we talk about what we've learned about the nature of healing based on what we've discovered in our own practices. So please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Christina Andrle. Christina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to just jump right into it. I would love to hear about you and what it is that you do. So tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'm a chiropractor, also an acupuncturist, which is really fun for me because it kind of gives me two big scopes of practice to really draw from. One's got this classical Western medical view and then Chinese medicine is this whole other picture of health. So for me, being able to combine those two is to me, we're just really powerful and wonderful. I mean, as far as the chiropractic piece goes, that was a bigger journey of discovery for me in ending up doing what I do within chiropractic, because it's a lot different than what a lot of other people are doing. So it's an interesting paradigm for me to try to explain that and to also practice it.
You mean the type of chiropractic that you practice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess a little more on that is, it's really a mix of applied kinesiology, energetic kinesiology, craniosacral therapy, and activator method. So it's really this mix of techniques that have been brought together in a really powerful way.
And so what would a session look like when somebody comes in to see you for chiropractic?
The first appointment it's a really lengthy examination process, because what I'm doing is really looking at full body biomechanics and deciding what the muscles are doing in relationship to each other and to a large degree to the pelvis, because that's kind of this major center of gravitational force, but also ground reactive force. So if your pelvis is off, then everything else can be off.
Yeah.
And anything and everything. Everybody's different, right? We all relate to the world in a different way. But, gravity is a constant. So we're always in relationship to gravity in some way, depending on what we do.
So how do you make the assessment?
The biggest piece of that is that the pelvis is a ring structure. It's a reciprocal structure. So what tends to happen is that the pelvis gets stuck in one direction or the other. When that happens, it's usually due to an injury of some sort. The body's then, it recoils and creates these patterns of inactive and overactive muscle groups to protect the injury it has sustained.
Are you talking about an injury to the pelvic area or an injury to the body and the pelvis responds
It can
to
be
it?
both. It can be both. If you had an injury to the ankle, for example, because you're limping, you could create a dysfunction in the pelvis. But if the pelvis is really easily upset if you get in a car accident, you've got your foot on the brake or something, and you create this shearing kind of force, let's say.
Been there, done that.
Right. Or, even, if you are already susceptible to something else, you can step off the sidewalk wrong and you didn't know it was there, and all of a sudden you jam up through the pelvis. Or any kind of twisting injury, the classic, you go to pick up something, you're picking it up wrong, and you've got this herniated effect. That can do it too, because the last lumbar vertebrae have a very strong correlation with what the pelvis is doing when it is going into its rotations. So the exam that I do is deciding what's happening in the pelvis. For example, psoas is a huge muscle. It goes up, it attaches to the spine, and it attaches to the leg, it's attached to the ilium on the inside. So that, for example, is one of the telltale muscles that I would use to decide what is the pelvis doing. The glute max is another one, for example. Even the latissimus is
Check you out, throwing all these anatomy muscle names at me.
Yeah, but it's
No, it's good. You're on a roll. Go.
well, the interesting thing is that the body creates patterns. And so that's what I'm doing, is I'm figuring out the pattern of the holding pattern that your body is in. And then the technique with the activator is essentially undoing compensation patterns that your body has built up over time.
Okay, so before you talk about the activator,
Yeah.
how can you tell? Are you just looking at someone's posture? Are you looking at someone walking to see what their pelvis is doing, or are you feeling around?
Yeah, so posture is certainly the very first thing that we look at. And a predictable pattern will have there will be predictable things that I look for but we've all been through a lot in our lives. So some people have layers and layers and layers of compensation due to many, many injuries. So those people are tough because you're finding different signs. You're not finding the pattern as easily as you should.
It's a little muddy.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happens. And then you start maybe chasing down one side, and then you think, oh my gosh, this is a major thing, but it's pointing to the opposite side of pelvic compensation is kind of how we refer to it. So it does start there. It starts with posture. And so if you ever see somebody with a really low shoulder, and then perhaps the hip is high on the same side, this is the kind of twist that I'm looking for. So the pelvis, actually, when it tips backwards, the ilium on the top creates this kind of high point. And so it looks like your pelvis is kind of high there. And so you look for those kind of patterns in posture. You can see it in gait as well. You can look for the foot being pointed too far outwards or your knee dropping in. There's a number of things you can look at.
Do you find you're assessing people as they're walking?
Yes, unfortunately.
It's a hazard of the job, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. You'll see somebody running down the street and you go, "Ee,
Yeah.
that if she doesn't
Check
have
out
knee
her
pain
foot,
now, it's a possibility at some point soon." So yeah, so to answer your question completely, it's posture is one thing that we look at. We check all different kinds of muscles to see what is weak and what isn't. And they all create these predictable patterns. I also check leg length. I'll check for tenderness in certain areas. For example, the inside of the leg where your adductor muscles are attaching. One side will be tighter than the other, and it's tender on the point where it attaches on the inside of the knee. And then the other major part, which some patients have experienced and some haven't, is this applied kinesiology aspect where you're muscle testing. So muscle testing is muscle testing in the sense of muscle monitoring as opposed to orthopedic muscle testing, right? Because that's the other big distinction that exists in applied kinesiology.
So describe the difference then so we can understand.
Yeah, so orthopedic muscle testing is kind of the classic thing you think of when you go to a doctor or a chiropractor and they're testing strength. It's about the strength of the muscle. Is it full power or is it not? Whereas what we do, and actually applied kinesiology is like that as well. It depends. It can be very varied. But what I do, we tend to use the word muscle monitoring more, because it actually isn't about the power of the muscle. It's not about the strength. It's about the integrity of the muscle in relationship to feedback loops. So what that looks like is you're pressing on a certain muscle group. I tend to use the anterior delt, so you're kind of the front of the arm. And if you lightly press on it, it's not going to go anywhere. It's an integrated group of muscles. But when you ask the body a question or you test it to see if there are issues in the body, if there's a question that creates an interruption in the feedback loop, the arm will actually go weak. So it's like that with nutrition response testing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. You're testing, the arm goes weak. Testing, it's strong, or strong. It can be either
Same
way.
idea. Okay.
Correct.
Which is what Susie Harris was talking about in a previous episode.
Right. And so what she does with a nutrition response testing, I'm kind of doing, but I'm doing it with biomechanics.
Okay. So that's another diagnostic for you.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds almost like cheating, huh?
It kind of is.
Well, no, but you're asking the body, and the body is telling you.
Yep. Yeah. And
I know it's not cheating. It's just
well, there's a beauty in putting your intellectual self aside and being really open and asking the body to show you what it needs.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah.
What a novel idea.
Yeah, right? And that's what I love about this technique is that, there are many times where I'm in the treatment room and I'll say, well, I don't know why, but we're doing this today. And I'll just do it. And sometimes I don't always know what the outcome is going to be because it's not me. It's not me making an intellectual decision in that moment. It's that person's body telling me. So it's always interesting.
I bet. Yeah. And it sounds like it's super helpful.
Yeah.
So tell me about the activator. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's an adjusting tool that has a lever in it. It delivers.
Is it the percussive thing?
So it's not, it doesn't percuss. So those ones are electric and they create a series of thuds.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle in that you're delivering specific pounds per pressure into a given area and a given vector. So if you find that there's a rotational issue in the joint, you will give that joint information in a particular vector to say, okay, you're rotated one way. I want you to rotate the other way.
So what does it end up looking like?
So it looks like, my partner always calls it the Clicky Pen because that's kind of what it looks like. It's just a handle that you pull and it's got a tip on it. So the tip is on the body and then you pull the lever and it goes and it just creates, so it can be adjusted to as low as 2.5 pounds of pressure up to like 30 pounds per pressure or something, which is intense. I don't do it on that high of a setting ever.
The person flies across the room.
Yeah, it's like you're using the force or some qigong.
Yeah.
So it's very low force, which is amazing because a lot of people get scared about chiropractic. They're thinking, I don't want to get my neck cracked.
Well, they think about, the hard adjustments, the cracking of bones.
Yeah, and it can be really scary.
And so you're not doing hard adjustments like that?
Not at all. It's all low force adjusting, which is awesome. There's actually research out there now showing, well, they're trying to discover when you're adjusting joints in that way, what is the most effective. So there are studies actually coming out that when you adjust the joint manually with the cracking, it's very hard. There is an immediate change in the joint, but the long-term effect doesn't seem to be there. And that's where the stigma comes in about chiropractors. Oh, I've heard once you see a chiropractor, you have to keep seeing the chiropractor. Forever.
Actually, when I first went to a chiropractor, he delivered hard adjustments, bone cracking. And I felt like my body didn't hold the adjustment. So I'd have to keep going back. And then when I tried a more energetic version of chiropractic, my body loved those and held them much better.
Yeah, well, and in my mind, the difference in those two approaches is that what you're doing with these lower force adjusting techniques is that you're actually telling the body it's informational medicine. It's not forced upon the body. And so you're saying, it's like knock, knock. Hey, listen here, body. We're discovering that this is off. And when you do a low force adjustment, you're not actually moving the joint.
Was it more like an invitation?
Yes. So the activator, which is the cool thing, is, as I explained before, when you put that tip in the direction that you want to adjust, you're creating that vibrational force through the joint in the direction that you want it to go. So the body is now saying, "Oh, I am way over here." Mechanoreceptors are saying, "Oh yes, I am rotated. This isn't right." And then it creates this cascade effect so that the body will then fix itself, as opposed to saying, okay, you as a chiropractor or some other manual therapist, you notice that joint's out, so you crack it. What that actually ends up doing is it creates this dynamic within the joint where all the proprioceptive information and the mechanoreceptor information is all going, whoa, it has a whole new reality. And so it's
really fast.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was saying with the research before, where it has an immediate effect. And so now its whole relationship it's not stuck in that position it was.
Mm-hmm. What a relief, right?
Right.
However,
the body will then have to recreate what is its normal relationship to the other joints, muscles, tissues around it. And more often than not, it settles back in exactly where it was. And that's the paradigm where you're going and seeing your chiropractor all the time.
Right. I guess the muscles are remembering the injury or the misalignment or whatever, right? Are they pulling the bones out?
Yeah, I mean, so...
Or am I being too simplistic?
Well, it's not too simplistic. It's more like, I mean, the bones don't really ever go out of place. It's kind of, it's more like that they're not in the right relationship with each other. I mean, because the joints have some degree of pliability, but only so much. And so they will get stuck in positions. The question is how it got there, right? So if you reset that joint manually, well, maybe it's there because you hurt your knee a couple weeks ago and it's not healing properly, and now you're limping, and now you have this kinetic chain effect
from compensating or whatever.
And then, so then your spine is out in a couple of places and you go crack, 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 crack. Yay, you feel better. And then...
But you didn't address the initial reason why your spine was out to begin with.
And young people tend to sometimes not even know. I mean, you could have fallen skiing and it hurt for a couple of days, but you're fine now.
Oh yeah, because you're superhuman when you're young.
Yeah, right, to be young again. I watch kids out there and they're just like, going crazy, and man, if I did that. But yeah, so it's kind of like you might not even realize that there's this pattern building because your body is young and strong and it's doing what it's supposed to do. Our
and you get
are
used
so
to
smart.
it too. I mean, you just adjust to the dysfunction.
Yeah, and it might not even, there might be dysfunction and, you don't even have pain yet because our bodies are so smart. They're always going to be working to keep you at optimum, even if that means sacrificing a particular tissue because it's not functioning properly for whatever reason. And it's saying, okay, well, we can't deal with that right now. We got to go.
We have a plan B.
Yeah. And it creates muscle pattern dysfunction.
Right.
And so that's what I look for, and that's what I aim to correct.
So the activator, it's not actually touching the person, or is it?
It is. It's such a low force adjustment that it's not resetting the joint in the same way as just being like, pow, and then it has a whole fresh relationship, and then it ends up. This is kind of personifying a joint, right?
I get that. I know they don't really make those noises.
Yeah,
and
right.
Such. Yeah.
Yeah. The activator, it is on the joint and it is on the skin, but it's more like a suggestion saying, and if the body's been stuck in a pattern for so long, it's homeostasis. The body accepts a new normal, even though it's not normal. And so my job is to say, hey, this isn't normal. This is where you should be. And so therefore it's really a whole neurological reboot is what the treatments that I do end up being, is that it's full body biomechanical reboot, which is super cool. I can nerd out about it for a while.
No, it's cool that you're excited and passionate about your work. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just hard not to get caught up in your excitement. Because I'm feeling like I need an adjustment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And from my perspective, actually a really hard part about the way that I'm delivering adjustments is that with the activator, because it is so slight, a lot of people are saying, well, that's it. And it's like, yes, that's it. Your body is going to do the work. You
They're
don't
expecting
need,
something more dramatic.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's typically what they get, what other chiropractic adjustments or office visits look like. And ours just don't look that way. So it's interesting for me as a relatively new practitioner to kind of navigate that. I am a young practitioner, and that already kind of puts me in a position to have to almost not defend myself. I don't like to use that word because I never feel defensive about what I do, but it's kind of like
You have to prove yourself in a way. Is that what it is? Or
I feel that sometimes. I feel that based on the feedback that I get from people because it's like, well, what is happening here? And then you're explaining it, and it's not something they've ever really heard before.
it's like, that's crazy talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I'm familiar with that response.
You know.
It's true. I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, and I think every new practitioner has to go through that, no matter what modality we're working in.
Yeah.
I imagine for most of us, when we're first starting out, we're finding our practitioner sea legs,
Yeah.
and also in doing that, proving to ourselves that we don't have imposter syndrome, which I don't know if
That's
that
a
ever
real
goes
thing.
away.
Yeah.
And then there's also having to instill confidence in your clients
Right.
or patients or
Which
whatever
is
you
so
call them.
important.
Yeah, because they're coming to you in a vulnerable state. So you want to
Yeah.
make sure that they feel safe and comfortable and that you know what you're
And that
doing.
you have a plan.
Yeah.
I have a plan for you.
Yes.
Yeah, and well, in a large degree, as much as I'm saying, it's kind of hard to explain this technique away, which it can be a little bit overbearing. I mean, because
What do you mean?
the philosophy behind, well, the technique is called, I guess I could throw this out there too. It's called axial stability method. And so by creating stability within the axial system, not just the spine, right, the nervous system as well, you're creating a new stability for the body that's been slowly creating chaos over the years, right? It's our world and our bodies have a tendency for that anyway, entropy and all.
Maybe just a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here on planet Earth.
As is our lot.
Yep.
But it can be hard to explain because it really gets into really deep neurological concepts that it's really hard to put it in layman's terms. And so for me, I find myself explaining muscle testing in ways that if I ever explained it to an MD, they'd be like, "You're nuts." And so I think that's going back to the conversation also about being a new practitioner. It's like, how do you get across to people what you do in a meaningful way that really encompasses what you do and instills confidence?
Especially when it's in the realm of the energetic.
Yeah.
It's hard to put words to that.
Yeah.
Like with a bone cracking adjustment, that's pretty
It's very
straightforward.
mechanical. Yeah.
Oh, it makes sense. Okay, my
Yeah.
neck was out, so it's cracked back into place or
Yeah.
whatever, however you want to word it. When you're using your activator, it seems like, is she pulling the wool over my eyes?
Yeah.
Is this some kind of voodoo?
Yeah, and a lot of people, fortunately and unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. A lot of people think that. I mean, and also this technique combined with acupuncture, I've had some really weird and interesting things happen, and people are always calling it voodoo or calling me their witch doctor, and in
I'm
a good way.
familiar with
They
that
mean it.
response
Yeah.
as well.
And they always mean it in a good way. And in the beginning, I really tried to avoid that in senses, and I would say, no, there's a biomechanical explanation for all this. But in the end, I gave up.
Well, I mean, I think we want to be taken seriously and we want them to know it's legit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not typical legit. It's not
Exactly.
mainstream legit or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
And I imagine in time you'll probably find words that will describe what
Yeah,
it is you're doing, or maybe you won't. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll just have people come in and be like, don't worry about it. You'll feel better.
Well, your reputation will precede you, and people will be coming because they've heard amazing things.
Yeah, and and I'm waiting for that.
Well, you just opened your practice
I
here.
did. Yeah. our practice is waiting for that tipping point. Word of mouth is king, especially in small areas like
Especially in
this,
Vermont. Yeah.
especially in Vermont. And so we're really into patient education in that, and instilling confidence in people that they can do this
And that their
themselves.
body actually is brilliant at healing
Yeah,
itself when you give it the opportunity.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And when you connect to your body, I mean, I feel like our society in a large degree, we're so detached from the environment and then
Definitely.
therefore ourselves.
And ourselves as
Yeah.
well. And I would say, I mean, I think of us as a very cerebral, we're very much in our heads.
Yeah.
And I don't think we sink much deeper into our bodies than our heads
Yeah.
in the way that we analyze and reanalyze and then
Mm-hmm.
analyze some more. I studied martial arts
Mm.
back in the day, and the idea of being centered
Yeah.
so that you
So
don't get,
important.
yeah, that your center is supposed to be 2 inches below your navel.
Yeah.
And I think that most Westerners, our centers are in our heads
Yeah.
or
I can
above our
agree with that.
heads. And that's particularly true with attention deficit disorder symptoms. I see that those of us who have those symptoms, our centers are above our heads,
Interesting.
making us very top heavy.
Yeah, I mean it's almost a maybe in an energetic sense it's almost like a lack of groundedness where it's like we're always operating on this level outside of ourselves.
Exactly.
There's expectations, all these things that we're trying to meet and
Yep. And
when
so,
you go in.
exactly. So, getting back to what you're saying, not having a relationship with your body,
Yeah.
I wonder how far we let things go
Yeah.
because we don't have that relationship with our bodies, and then how detrimental that can be over time.
Yeah.
And that's when you probably see those more complex cases.
Yeah. Yeah, that and injury, life happens.
Yeah, well, that, of course, yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting paradigm, which is why having actually both of these kind of avenues of what I do, the chiropractic piece, it is very biomechanical, but it is also energetic in a big way that I actually tend not to talk about a lot unless people are looking for that. Because I find, and I'm sure maybe you have an opinion on this too, is that if you start using words like the energy of the body and energetics of the body or anything in that category, people are either into it or they're not,
Yeah.
because it's this sort of validity question. Because we live in a world where people are saying to themselves, oh well, where are the double blind studies, where's the evidence? And to a large degree that's great. I mean, evidence is research is important, but there's also many different kinds of evidence of research. There's also the if you've done something in your practice for many, many years and there's not a double blind study on it, but you have brilliant success, does that mean that
Does it
it's
make it
not valid?
invalid? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And then there's also somebody's personal experience.
Yeah.
If they try something and it works for them,
Yeah.
then ta-da.
I didn't know what I was getting
Well,
myself into,
I'm a big
but
fan of placebo as well, the power of
yeah.
the mind and the role that thoughts and beliefs play in our healing and, well, just in our lives in
Yeah.
general, and how much they color our experience of reality.
I love the placebo effect. A lot of people will say it in a negative way, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, maybe it's just placebo. And I'm like, you know what? If it is,
That's
great.
pretty amazing. Yeah. I mean, just think about how powerful that is and what
Yeah,
that suggests.
exactly.
If our thoughts can create an outcome.
And they do. And we see it in studies too.
I know.
I
There's
think
more
it's
and more
great.
studies being done on the placebo effect.
Yeah.
And
I
how
love the
amazing.
placebo
Yeah, I know.
effect.
It's probably, it's my favorite science these days is the placebo effect.
Yeah, and I think I wish there was more open-mindedness about applying that in other settings. I mean, because there are people, you hear stories of people recovering from cancer because they were seeing somebody who was guiding them through their own body awareness and what's going on, and maybe removing trauma that's manifesting in the body, things like that. But the science community, to a large degree, is not interested in that because there's no way to study it. But then there's this whole placebo effect conversation. And to me, it's the same thing. It's utilizing the power of the mind to heal the body. So it's fascinating for
Yeah,
sure.
it's rich territory, definitely. So acupuncture, did you study that before or after becoming a chiropractor?
At the same
At
time.
the same time.
Yeah, it was a long, long journey. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I started the chiropractic program, and after a year into it, so it's an accelerated program. So there's it's full time all year long, and they do 15 weeks worth of material, and you just get all this information all at the same time. So after about a year into the chiropractic program, they allow you to add on the Masters of Acupuncture, which I did. I knew my life would be hell for about a year.
And was it?
It was a lot. It was really, really it was probably the most taxing thing that I've ever done in my entire
I
life.
imagine it
Um,
was, yeah.
just the mental aptitude that you have to conjure to do all the things that two programs like that require. It just
When I just think about acupuncture, the Chinese medicine
yeah,
in and of itself is such a
vast.
complex system,
Yeah.
and they're like systems within systems.
Yeah. Oh my
It's
gosh. Yeah, and I'm very grateful that I did both at the same time because it kind of jump started where I could go and what I could do. But I do feel like doing them at the same time was also it did a degree of disservice to what I was able to learn all at once. So I've been doing a lot of study even. I mean we all do, I suppose all practitioners do, but I felt like when I was done both of these programs that I really needed to really not stop. And a lot of my friends took breaks. They took 6 months off to recover, and I felt like I couldn't,
really,
because there was just so much information. And this is also a type A thing. I was an excellent student. I mean, it's easy for me. Not everyone can say the same thing, which
yeah, that would be me.
yeah, I mean, and
It's not.
everybody's different. And once you learn how to take a test, like,
You got this.
you
Yeah.
got it. So I was a very, very good student, but I always feel like if I don't know everything, which you can't ever
No
know
pressure.
everything. Yeah, right. So it was a journey for sure. For example, Chinese medicine is this. It is just so vast. I mean, you could
It's
study it
massive. Yeah.
forever and really not. Somebody could say something and be like, "Oh,
And
where
does
did
it
it?"
vary per region or is there one kind of way of look? Because I think about it from a martial arts
Yeah,
standpoint. So that I
there's
studied
so many
Chinese
different.
martial arts,
Yeah,
and just within the Shaolin system,
yeah,
depending on the region you were in, there were different techniques and styles within the system of Shaolin. So I was wondering if
yeah,
that was true of Chinese medicine.
yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the major texts that we study, they're kind of they've been put together over thousands of years, and I think the main texts that you learn from, they're really kind of not as varied as if you went and studied with a practitioner in a certain area. That's a really good question. I guess I don't know the answer to that 100%, but I mean, there's the Japanese style of acupuncture too, and if you their application is different than Chinese medicine. I mean,
Okay.
there is shallow needling, for example, and um, yeah. So to answer your question, for sure, the way that they teach it in the U.S. is based on a specific guidelines, I suppose. So it is more formalized, I guess you could say.
I imagine it would have to be.
Yeah, so we don't really learning in the US, you don't really get a taste of that as much. Of course, when you learn from particular teachers, you gain their wisdom and are inspired
Hmm.
by their expertise. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
So are you glad you did it now
Oh
that it's
yeah,
said and done? Yeah.
yeah, for sure. It gives me the freedom to be having a consult with a person and say, listen, you could very much benefit from this chiropractic technique that I do, but your body is so depleted, for example, from whatever. This is an experience that I have had where if people's bodies are just so depleted for whatever reason, whether, studying or they
Stress.
stress, illness, and their bodies are just struggling just to do normal life.
Yeah, just to get by.
Yeah, those people, it's like, listen, six acupuncture appointments and you will be feeling a lot better. And then your body is actually going to be able to do the changes that I'm going to ask it to do. Because if you ask a depleted system to make big changes.
If you add more information to a depleted system, it's
Right.
going to be overwhelmed and not be
Right.
able to, it
Yeah,
may
you're
not have the
asking the
energy
body
to
to do
do it.
something that it doesn't have the energy for.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a gift to be able to look at somebody and say, here's the plan.
Yeah. So we have an alternative strategy because
Right.
you're so depleted.
Yeah,
And you have the ability to do that, that's great.
Yeah, it's very cool. Some people do both, some people do one or the other, and flip a flop, whatever works. So I really enjoy being able to make really customized care plans. So I'm definitely glad that I did both. It was hardcore.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
I was thinking you were going to say, yeah, I went to chiropractic school and then 5 years later,
No.
I went to acupuncture school or vice versa.
No.
I did it all in one fell swoop.
I did. I tried to tack on an additional master's a
Did
year
you?
later.
What would that have been?
The herbal program.
Really? Okay. That would have made you a very well-rounded.
Yeah, I ended up not continuing with it after even just half a semester because I was heading down, crazy land again of just having so much obligation that I can't even.
Yeah, it sounds really intense. Yeah.
Well, Chinese herbs, I applaud anyone at any time who studies Chinese herbology because
So that was the focus of the program was Chinese herbal
Yes.
medicine.
The herbal program is so demanding. I mean, you have to know, first of all, hundreds and hundreds of herbs and then figure out their relationships together and then all those relationships in a Chinese medical theory.
Yeah,
to
that's
the body.
intense.
It's really intense.
Yeah, I feel like I want to take a nap just listening to how much work that would be.
Yeah.
Nothing personal. It's just,
No.
It was just really just thinking about
Yeah.
how involved that is.
You've got some super cool stuff going on here. I mean, I love working with practitioners who are not just focused on the physical body or the wakeful consciousness. It's kind of like diving into that unconscious part of our
I'm with
realities. It's fascinating.
That's where a lot of really cool shit is.
Yeah.
That's where I think you can find a lot of the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that was another reason that I definitely wanted to make your acquaintance is because I find many times, and other chiropractors I'm sure would say the same, acupuncturists too, is that you'll be working with someone and many, many, many things get better, but some things don't.
Yep. Why
And
is that?
Why is it?
That's what I'm always
Especially-
intrigued by. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why is this person not having success?
Yeah.
And
Especially
if
if there's no air quotes here, if there's no reason that they shouldn't be getting better.
Right. But there typically is what I found over the years of doing this work is that if you do the detective work, you can find that there's usually a limiting belief and that may be related to a trauma the person experienced or not. It could just be what I call an ancestral belief. It's one of those beliefs that's passed on from generation to generation. It just
Don't
becomes
they say
kind
it's
of
like 14 generations or something that can stay in the DNA?
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm also referring to the beliefs that we have in our family systems that
Oh, I see.
like, oh, you can't trust anybody or wait for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Good things don't
interesting.
last. And that those kinds of beliefs can get inside. And so if you're trying to do healing work with someone, invite them to move into a new direction,
Yeah.
that kind of belief can sabotage the effect of the healing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like if they have a
absolutely.
limiting belief, but it's so subtle and it's so under
Hard
the
to
radar
pin
and
down, yeah.
it's such a part of their interior world that they don't even realize they have it because
Right.
it's so deep.
And do you find that these limiting beliefs or limiting factors that they hold manifest in any different kind of way in the physical body, whether it be pain or
To me, by the time it
Yeah.
gets to the physical, then it's really
Bad.
trying to get your attention.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So of course I have the shamanic bent, which from the indigenous perspective, they would say if you want to get to the root of something, you go to the dream time.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything starts there and then it has a reflection in the energetic,
Yep.
which manifests or pops out in the physical as an experience.
Interesting.
So to me, the dream time is consciousness.
Ah.
And then that has the reflection in the energetic, which, like I said, becomes an experience in the physical.
Right.
So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we're finding too in our practice. I mean, there's, and I think it takes a good practitioner too to be like, okay, listen here. You need to go see Wendy because this, for example, seems like something that is not going to go away with the Clicky Pen.
Well, yes, I think that is an interesting, and there's lots of different ways to explore that interior. I mean, shamanism is one of them, but there are other ways
Yeah.
to do that as well. And I think certainly the realm of alternative healing is moving more and more that direction. And I think about the field of psychology, how that seems to be moving more in a direction that's really
Yeah.
exciting in both somatic therapies that are
Mm-hmm.
looking at how trauma is held
In the
in the
body.
physical
Yeah.
body and then developing a relationship with your body to be able to understand what your body's trying to tell
Right.
you and
Yeah.
to release.
Body keeps the score.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have that book in the back, I think. And then the blossoming field of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy,
Uh-huh.
which takes you right into the dream
So
time
interesting.
with the help of plant medicines
Yeah.
to help you get right to the heart of things.
Yeah, and I think that it ends up being the reason why it's becoming so much more interesting to people is because, I mean, inevitably when you're more and more, as we said many parts of this conversation before about being in this very much cerebral space where you're kind of dealing with everything outside the body, it's kind of like at some point something's got to give, and you've got to go internally, or you're just gonna either not heal from the thing that you're experiencing, or everything goes to hell in a handbasket in all sorts of places.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
and to me that's just information, right?
Yeah.
It's just information to bring your focus inward. And
Yeah.
again, I can say from the shamanic standpoint, it's all about making friends with the things that you are avoiding.
Yeah.
So the fears, the insecurities, the challenges, the symptoms.
Yep. Yeah,
So-
recognizing these things and
They're just there to get your attention,
Yeah.
trying to tell you something.
yeah, that's fascinating. I find myself being because the technique that I do allows for this is I find myself becoming very interested in studying more sensory integration issues, and this is a slightly off topic but kind of not really to some degree, and also neurodevelopmental issues, because it's all about information and where's the information being stagnated. And I think that it's so interesting. I think the statistic right now is that 1 in 7 kids are considered to be on the spectrum these days.
Yeah.
Or
What's
in
that
the-
about?
Yeah, what's that about? And is it the relationship as we've created with the world around them? Is it
Environmental? Is it
yeah,
toxicity?
yeah? And it's certainly a combination.
Are
to
humans
degrees of all these
evolving
things.
in some way
Yeah, that's another conversation
that we're just not aware of yet?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I find myself getting very fascinated in this conversation because it's kind of it's the idea of digging deeper, checking reflex patterns and really kind of looking at what is happening that's not just cracking joints. So it's amazing work. So more of my background is my bachelor's is in psychology, and with
All right.
the concentration in cognitive psychology. And I just found the brain at that time, my thoughts about the human brain were it was so fascinating to me because it's kind of like quantum physics in the sense that there's a certain degree to which at some point we don't have any more answers.
Oh, yeah.
It's like
I don't think we don't have to go too far before we hit that territory.
Right. And so it's this cool thing where, you're tracking, you can look at the receptors in the eyeball. They're taking in information and they're taking in light, and then it flips an image, and then,
Hmm.
it creates this relationship in the brain. You can see the part of the brain that lights up, but then after that, what is the interpretation process?
Brilliant question. And there we step into the mystery, which I
I
love.
love the mystery.
Yeah, it is. It's wicked cool.
Yeah.
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 So, were you always interested in getting into healing work as a kid, or is this something that developed later on in life?
Yeah, not as a kid. I kind of always carried this thing that I knew that I would be doing something interesting. That's all I knew.
That's such an interesting word too. The word interesting is interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And through experiences and meeting certain people, I really started getting into the world of understanding your own body and the body energetics and things like that. And one of the very first things in my path, as far as a healer's path, is Reiki. And I took two different courses twice. I didn't. So I mean, technically, I've been through the master's training, but I don't go around calling myself a Reiki master. I don't know. It doesn't feel. Anyway, it's always on. Anyway, in my treatment rooms, it's always there. But the thing that I found so fascinating at that time, I was 20 when I was doing Reiki for the first time. And I didn't know exactly how I felt about it. I was doing Reiki on my friends, and they had a stuffy nose, right? So it's kind of like, well, what's going on here? Is anything really happening? And so I decided at that time to volunteer at the hospital. I knew the woman who was running the Reiki volunteer program. And that's when I discovered that this hands-on energetic modality worked, because I would go in to these rooms and you put your hands on people, and you could watch their respiration went down, their heart rates went down, and
Because they're on monitors.
yeah, because they're
Yeah.
on monitors, and then most everybody fell asleep because their body's kind of descending into this place where it can hopefully do some healing work. And I would always sneak out of the room. One of my favorite stories, I'll never forget this in my entire life. I was getting ready to move to Germany from when I lived in Europe, and I was making a cookbook with my partner at the time. And so I'm Reikiing this woman who I had seen multiple times at that point because she was just an ill person. And I'm Reikiing her, and she had already fallen asleep, and I kept thinking of recipes, and in my mind I'm saying, stop that, like, be clear your mind and do Reiki. And I just kept thinking about recipes, and I had a lot of things going on. And so I go to sneak out of her room. I would always leave them a note and sneak out of the rooms. And so I'm sneaking out of her room, and the door goes, eek. And so I look over my shoulder, and this woman opens her eyes and starts telling me about this pork and fiddlehead recipe that she and her mom used to make back in the day. And she just kept explaining it. And I'm standing there with my mouth wide open, going,
Wow.
holy moly. Because I already had this experience of watching the physiological effects of the things that I was doing. But that was not coincidence. And that was my first experience of, that was thought transfer. She and I were energetically connected in that way. And she wakes up talking about this recipe. And that to me was just mind blowing at the time.
It just takes one experience like that to
Yeah.
get your attention.
Yeah.
And then you can go in a couple of different directions. You can write it off and just call it a coincidence. If it gets your attention and it
That
makes
caught my
the
attention.
hair on your arms stand on end, then
Yeah.
yeah,
I tend
welcome
to
to the
not
world
think
of
that.
mystery.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. And so that's just one of my favorite stories about that kind of influence.
That's a
And
cool story. Yeah.
yeah, so ever since then, people all the time they'll come in and be like, "I know this sounds weird, but," and
Do they sound like that when they say it?
yeah, just letting you know that this is weird. But I've heard it, and I tell them, like, listen, I've heard it all. Nothing sounds weird anymore.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded story of how I ended up on a path of of healing. And then you put the idea of putting a little bit of education behind something that comes naturally to you. Just made sense. So,
Well, it seems like you're in the right position in life.
I hope so.
No, it seems like it. It definitely comes through. Like I was saying before, your passion, and you are really driven in your work.
Thank you.
No, it's really it's lovely to see. And I hope you're just amazingly successful here in Montpelier.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to really building and being more involved in our community and just making a difference. This is the start.
I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting. I have to say I have not done a podcast before, so this is super exciting.
No, you did great. You're a natural.
Thanks.
Like I said in the intro, Christina is an innately gifted healer. If she's this good as a new practitioner, then she'll be a freaking wizard in a couple of years. If you'd like to connect with her, please visit her website, vitallife.center with one L. Thank you so much for listening and for your support this year. Until next year.